Our story begins with the world's top sword immortal, who has just woken from a dream where he was betrayed and wounded by his own master and senior sisters. In that vision, his sword valley was forcibly stripped away to be given to his junior brother, all to please a boy who was actually a spy. Later, the great Qian dynasty's army launched a surprise attack, causing devastating losses to the elders and disciples, while that beloved junior brother watched the chaos. Even the sect master, who had doted on the boy, met a tragic end at the hands of her own disciple, a scene so grim it caused Lu Ran to wake in shock. He is startled to find himself back in the past, only to be met by the cold reprimand of his master, Su Yueling, who tells him to give up his home. She demands he pack up and move out of Little Yufeng because his junior brother likes it, suggesting he pick any other spot in the sect instead. Before Lu Ran can even respond, the junior brother, Liang Xiaoyu, hides a flash of pride behind a mask of false humility, pleading for the master to stop. Xiaoyu claims that although he loves the place, he wouldn't want to take it from brother Lu Ran, but his words only trigger a wave of mockery from the crowd. The surrounding elders and disciples sneer, remarking that Xiaoyu is simply too kind-hearted, while Lu Ran is just a useless man with blocked meridians. To them, allowing such a talentless person to occupy such a precious cultivation land was nothing more than a complete waste of resources. Lu Ran realizes that since heaven allowed him to dream of the next 100 years, he must not repeat those mistakes. This time, he will live for himself. With that resolve, he immediately cups his hands and bows deeply to his master, Su Yueling, declaring his wish to leave the great Luo sword sect. He asks for her permission to descend the mountain, a request that sends a shockwave of disbelief through everyone watching the scene unfold. Su Yueling freezes for a moment, looking at the bowing young man with a flicker of complicated emotion, remembering how she once brought him here herself. However, after discovering his blocked meridians, she had stopped teaching him, believing that any effort spent on him would be entirely futile. 10 years have passed, and the promises she made to Lu Ran have long since faded, just like the thin bond of affection between master and disciple. Her focus is now entirely on Liang Xiaoyu, so she frowns, accusing Lu Ran of using this resignation as a petty threat to keep his home. She asks if he will regret this, but Lu Ran doesn't even look up, having already seen through the cold reality of his situation and his own limitations. He calmly explains that rather than wasting his life here, he would rather see the vast world, words that strike Su Yueling with unexpected force. She suddenly realizes that Lu Ran isn't trying to negotiate or threaten her. He truly intends to leave the sect behind forever. Given the state of his meridians, staying at the Great Luo Sword Sect really would be a waste of time. Perhaps seeing the world is a better path. His position as a direct disciple had always been a thorn in Su Yueling's side, a promise she made herself that she couldn't easily break without looking bad. Now that he is choosing to leave on his own, it seems like the perfect solution for everyone. We hear Lu Ran repeat his request once more. He asks his master to grant this wish, as he has no desire to relive that 100-year nightmare. He may have blocked meridians, but he possesses the primordial sword body. More importantly, he has a unique ability to grow stronger just by drinking, a true powerhouse's foundation, if there ever was one. If the sect hadn't forbidden alcohol, he never would have lived so miserably in that dream. Now, he's determined to drink his fill the moment he leaves. Su Yueling hesitates, not because she'll miss him. After all, a man with blocked meridians has less of a future than even a lowly chore disciple. She simply worries that agreeing too quickly might seem cold-hearted. Seeing her waver, the others in the crowd decide to help her along. They remark that Lu Ran's self-awareness is a good thing and urge the sect master to let him go, as this place is no fit for him. They mockingly call him a good seed, while reminding the master that his direct disciple token must be reclaimed so he can't exploit the sect's name. As the voices rise around him, Lu Ran suddenly remembers the token and calmly holds it out in the palm of his hand. Seeing this, Su Yueling finally nods, agreeing to his departure. She notes that since they were once master and disciple, she won't send him away empty-handed. She tosses a small pile of spirit stones before him for his travels. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she uses her power to retrieve the token. The direct disciple token flies into her hand, and, in the next second, she crushes it into dust, officially stripping him of his status. With that single gesture, his last remaining bond with the Great Luo Sword Sect is severed. To the onlookers, this is a moment of pure celebration. They cheer, declaring that junior brother Xiaoyu is now the sect's undisputed top disciple, and that little Yufeng finally belongs to him. Su Yueling tells Xiaoyu to focus on his training and ask for any resources he needs, calling him the sect's only hope to become a sacred land. It's a classic case of nursing a tiger that will eventually bite back. By handing Xiaoyu power, they are inviting the very disaster Lu Ran saw in his dream. Lu Ran bows one last time to Su Yueling in gratitude. Having secured his freedom, he turns to leave without a second glance. He doesn't even touch the spirit stones on the ground. 10 years ago, he arrived with nothing, brought here by the very woman who now casts him out. 20 years have passed, and now, with a simple wave of his sword rope, he leaves as cleanly as he arrived. From this moment on, he and the Great Luo Sword Sect are no longer connected in any way. As for Liang Xiaoyu's true identity or the Great Dynasty's conspiracies, Lu Ran doesn't bother mentioning them. No one would believe him anyway, so he lets them follow their own path. At that same moment, before the stargazing platform of the Heavenly Mystery Pavilion, the white-haired pavilion master, Yujizi, suddenly finds his eyes lighting up with shock. He stands abruptly, staring intently at a strange phenomenon on the star map, muttering that the hidden fortune element he could never locate has unexpectedly vanished from the great Luo sword sect. Without a second's hesitation, he calls out for Yao Yao. In the side hall, Qin Wu Yao was busy napping during her cultivation. Startled, she rushes over to ask her master what happened. He asks if she remembers the great Luo sword sect he mentioned before. Qin Wu Yao nods dizzily. Of course she remembers. Her master has been obsessing over it for 20 years. To her, the great Luo sword sect is just a second-rate sect. But Yujizi, having peered into the heavenly rhythm, knows it contained a massive fortune element. It was always quite strange, though, that fortune never seemed to benefit the sect itself. Despite the pavilion's secret investigations, they could never figure out what that fortune actually was. But today it has vanished. He orders her to investigate what happened at the sect immediately. If she finds a lead, she must secure that fortune at any cost. Yujizi speaks with absolute gravity. Qin Wuyao doesn't dare delay, though she can't help but ask just how big this fortune really is. Her master's expression is intense as he utters 4 simple words: unite the 9 sects. Meanwhile, back at the Great Luo Sword Sect, life continues as if nothing has changed since Lu Ran's departure. In fact, because he is gone, quite a few people are actually celebrating. Senior sister Wang Yujiao is among them. As for Lu Ran's former home, little Yufeng, Liang Xiaoyu didn't even wait until the next day. He moved in immediately. Inside the main hall, Wang Yujiao clings affectionately to Xiaoyu's arm, completely ignoring Xiaoyu's attendants standing nearby. She tells him that little Yufeng is finally his, calling him the future hope of the Great Luo Sword Sect. She asks him not to forget her when he eventually takes the sect master's throne. She even tells him not to feel guilty, as Lu Ran should have left long ago. A man with blocked meridians clinging to the status of top direct disciple was, in her eyes, simply detestable. Guilty. Liang Xiaoyu glances at her coldly. He casually tells her he needs her to do something for him. Wang Yujiao doesn't think twice, promising him anything he wants with a blushing face that makes the nearby attendants swallow hard. It is at this moment that Liang Xiaoyu's expression suddenly turns freezing cold. Xiaoyu tells her to find a few reliable disciples to head down the mountain, intercept Lu Ran, and bring him back. Wang Yujiao is visibly startled. Although she spent years mocking and ridiculing Lu Ran, they were still fellow disciples. To be honest, her recent hostility was merely a way to secure more resources for Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu raises an eyebrow, asking if she is unwilling to do even this small thing for him. He adds that when he eventually takes the sect master's throne, he truly hopes she will be the one standing right there by his side. He reminds her that Lu Ran hasn't been gone long, so his tracks will be easy to find, provided she uses people she can trust. Wang Yujiao nods obediently. She sways her hips as she exits the hall, leaving the attendants behind. One follower can't help but mutter that this girl is far too easy to manipulate. Hearing this, Xiaoyu's eyes narrow dangerously. He coldly reminds the man how many times he has told them never to call him prince while they are here. The attendant's face pales instantly as he quickly changes the subject, asking why they shouldn't just use their own men to intercept Lu Ran instead of outsiders. He worries that involving others might cause unnecessary trouble, but Xiaoyu simply chuckles, a sound filled with a chilling sort of confidence. He explains that from this moment on, Wang Yujiao is his pawn. If the Great Luo Sword Sect ever investigates Lu Ran's disappearance, the trail leads to her, leaving Xiaoyu completely untouched. Besides, he notes that no one actually cares about Lu Ran's safety anyway. He then glances dismissively at his follower. He promises that if the man likes that kind of woman, he can have her as a servant once the sect master's position is secured. Meanwhile, we turn to Lu Ran. By evening, he finally reaches Qingshi town, located about 30 miles from the mountain. It is the closest settlement to the sect he once called home. Having never left the mountain before, he simply followed the main road until he arrived. This is, quite literally, his first real look at the outside world. After a lifetime within the sect, he is finally experiencing the vibrant energy of the common people. He decides to step into a local tavern. A waiter greets him warmly, asking what he'd like to eat. Lu Ran simply asks if they have wine. His unique ability to grow stronger through drinking has been dormant for 10 long years, and it is finally time to use it. The waiter asks what specific kind of wine he prefers. Since he has no idea what varieties exist in this world, he simply tells the man to bring a bowl of every kind they have. Soon, a dozen bowls are served. He ignores the food and starts with the first bowl. Instead of the harsh burn he expected, his ability makes the liquid feel incredibly smooth and refreshing. It feels as wonderful as drinking celestial nectar. At that moment, a familiar notification echoes in his mind. He has gained power from drinking low-quality wine. The moment the notification for 1 year of cultivation echoes, Lu Ran feels his dantian swell with power. His eyes light up with sudden realization. He quickly inspects his inner self. Because of his crippled meridians, he was never able to cultivate spiritual energy, leaving his dantian completely empty. But now, spiritual energy has actually appeared, and quite a lot of it. It seems drinking can directly increase his cultivation base. At this rate, drinking 1 jar a day for a month would grant him a millennium of power, and that is only with the cheap stuff. The more he analyzes the potential rewards, the more excited he becomes. For 10 years, he wondered how this ability would actually manifest. Even in his wildest dreams, he never expected it to be this explosive. Soon, after finishing a dozen bowls, his progress is staggering. His dantian is now filled with the kind of energy others spend decades of bitter cultivation to accumulate. However, the alcohol is also taking its toll. Since he hasn't learned how to use that new energy to sober himself up, he finds himself becoming completely dazed and confused. The world begins to blur as the sheer volume of wine finally catches up with him. The waiter watches as the man who boldly ordered one of everything collapses onto the table. Naturally, the waiter's first concern is the unpaid bill. Just then, a girl dressed in vibrant red robes approaches. She calmly tells the waiter that Lu Ran is her friend and she will handle the tab. She tosses down a low-grade spirit stone, which is so valuable it nearly gives the poor waiter a heart attack from the sheer overpayment. The girl, Qin Wuyao, glances at Lu Ran as he mumbles for more wine in his sleep. She simply waves off the change with a casual gesture. She asks for the remaining balance to be converted into over 100 wine pouches, which she tucks away before carrying Lu Ran out of the tavern. She takes him to a nearby forest and leans him against a tree. Sitting across from him, she begins to study him with deep curiosity. She notes that the only news from the great Luo sword sect is Lu Ran's departure. She wonders if this man with crippled meridians is truly the one her master mentioned. As she speaks, she suddenly senses a fluctuation of spiritual energy coming from him. Wu Yao is stunned. A man with his condition shouldn't have any energy at all. She extends her divine sense to investigate. Inside Lu Ran, those newly gained years of spiritual power are automatically surging against his blocked meridians. At the exact moment her sense touches him, the energy breaks through. Wu Yao jumps back in shock as his aura suddenly flares up. A man who shouldn't be able to cultivate has somehow broken through his bottlenecks while dead drunk. To be honest, it is an utterly bizarre sight. We must understand that for any cultivator, there is usually only one way to obtain spiritual power, whether through meditation, pills, or even rare and exotic herbs. All source energy must be extracted and refined into spiritual power through the body's meridians and cycles. That is the natural law of their world. Yet here is Lu Ran, a man born with crippled meridians, somehow breaking through his bottlenecks. And that isn't even the end of it. While he snores away, reeking of alcohol, his aura continues to grow. He quickly reaches the mid-stage of foundation establishment and keeps climbing. Before long, he hits the late stage, leaving Qin Wuyao completely dumbfounded. It is one thing for a man with crippled meridians to gain energy. But this man isn't even practicing. He is just sleeping off a heavy binge. He broke through automatically half an hour ago, and as time passes, his aura is already approaching the very peak of the late foundation establishment stage. 5 hours later, we see Lu Ran finally wake up. His head throbs painfully. Cheap wine, it seems, comes with a rather heavy price the next morning. Suddenly, he notices something is different. A quick internal scan reveals he has reached foundation establishment. Just like that, his eyes light up. This ability to grow stronger by drinking is truly formidable. One night of drinking, and he is already at the late-stage peak. A single meal has surpassed 10 years of another's bitter cultivation. Thinking of how he wasted away at the great Luo sword sect makes him want to slap himself for the lost time. Just then, a voice echoes in his mind, congratulating him on successfully completing a hangover. He has earned a reward, the dual cold sword intent. To be honest, receiving a reward for being hungover is a bit absurd, but sword intent is no joke. As a former disciple, he knows its value. Even the sect leader, Sui Welling, hasn't mastered it. It is truly a double stroke of luck. However, he soon realizes his surroundings are all wrong. He was drinking in a tavern, so why is he now in the middle of the wilderness? It is pitch black, but with his new spiritual power, he is no longer as blind in the dark as he used to be. That is when he spots Qin Wuyao sitting across from him and nearly jumps out of his skin. He demands to know who she is and why she's there. Seeing a woman in red staring at him intensely in the dead of night makes his hair stand on end. Qin Wuyao, however, simply rolls her eyes. She points out that he's been mumbling for ages without noticing her. He swallows hard, feeling only slightly relieved to hear a human voice. Once he calms down, Lu Ran realizes he was simply too distracted to notice Qin Wuyao sitting there, and he begins to study her closely. He asks if she was the one who brought him out of the tavern. Qin Wuyao shrugs, noting she didn't just bring the drunkard, but his wine too. With a casual wave of her hand, a pile of wine jars appears before them. We see Lu Ran's eyes light up the moment he spots them. He immediately grabs a jar, thanking her and promising to pay her back later. Without another word, he cracks it open to take a drink. He ignores the headache from the cheap alcohol, focusing only on his growth. Now that he's left the great Luo sword sect, he is on his own. He possesses the primordial sword body and the ability to grow stronger by drinking, but his cultivation level is still far too low. He lacks weapons, treasures, or even basic armor. In a world where the strong eat the weak, he knows he must raise his level urgently. He drinks the low-quality wine, gaining 8 days of cultivation, then 11, and then another 6 days. It's a start, at least. But these numbers make him pause. Previously, a single bowl gave him a full year of progress. Why has it suddenly dropped to mere days? Even the best results are only 2 weeks. He suspects that as his realm increases, the rewards from cheap wine will naturally diminish. As he ponders this, he suddenly notices shadows moving in the darkness around them. He squints his blurry eyes to get a better look. He chuckles, realizing that even after leaving the mountain, the Sword Sect disciples have come to stop him. To be honest, he expected this. He stands up unsteadily, snapping off a nearby tree branch to use as a makeshift weapon while facing the approaching disciples. There are over 30 of them, and they aren't even trying to hide their identities. They are all wearing the Great Luo Sword Sect uniforms. Judging by their attire, every single one of them is an inner court disciple. He has looked at those robes for 20 years. He knows them better than anyone. He sways on his feet, slowly raising his wooden branch. Looking at the 30 men, a wave of bitterness washes over him. Suddenly, the words dual cold sword intent flash through his mind. The phrase dual cold reminds him of an old poem about a single sword chilling 14 provinces. He used to be quite fond of it. The poem describes a man of extraordinary talent and ambition, a popular figure whose presence fills a hall with distinguished guests. And once, Lu Ran was exactly that, highly valued by the sect leader and the elders alike, right down to the lowliest disciple. He was once the center of attention, adored by servants, guards, and fellow disciples alike, but in a single night, he fell from grace. Having been an orphan before his reincarnation, he truly loved the Great Luo Sword Sect, even when his blocked meridians made cultivation impossible. Even when he was treated with cold indifference, he couldn't bear to leave, until that 100-year dream on the cliffs of Xiaoyu Peak changed everything. He finally woke up, realizing that master-disciple bonds and sect loyalty were all illusions. Having seen through the lies, he chose to leave. He left the Great Luo Sword Sect to start a new life, yet he never imagined that less than a day later, disciples would come to stop him. As Lu Ran mutters to himself, the disciples exchange glances. A few of them turn their gaze toward Qin Wuyao, who is still sitting nearby. They decide to take down Lu Ran first, coldly noting that his companion won't be allowed to leave either. To be honest, they aren't taking him seriously. But Lu Ran is the primary target and must be intercepted immediately. Hearing this, he suddenly bursts into a fit of wild, bitter laughter. He thinks of that poem about a hall full of guests and compares it to his current desolation. Abandoned by the sect, he can't even find peace in exile. The grief and indignation in his heart demand release, and he recites loudly. A hall of flowers intoxicated by 3,000 guests, a single sword chilling 14 provinces. With a laugh, he swings the tree branch. His footsteps are unsteady and drifting, making him look like a drunkard with no combat power left. Seeing his state, the disciples swarm forward all at once, planning to restrain him easily. Meanwhile, Qin Wuyao slowly stands up, ready to intervene. She has no intention of letting her new waiter be ruined by these disciples. But just then, something completely unexpected happens. We see a sudden, bone-chilling aura explode from Lu Ran, sweeping out in all directions. The disciples leading the charge have no time to dodge. In an instant, they are frozen solid by the icy mist, unable to move. The remaining disciples turn pale and scramble backward in shock. Lu Ran continues to dance with his makeshift sword, pouring out his heart. He tells them that in the sect, they all treated him like useless trash. Yet even after such a useless person leaves the mountain, they won't let him live. 30 inner court disciples sent to stop one failure. It's almost funny. He laughs at the sheer scale of their effort. It is a lonely, heroic laugh, yet there isn't a single trace of joy to be found on his face. With only sorrow left in his heart, his sword intent blooms around him like a lotus. The inner court disciples watching from a distance are suddenly swept up in it. Even Qin Wuyao is forced to focus and brace herself against the pressure. Fortunately, her own strength is more than enough to withstand the storm. The moment that massive sword intent strikes, she shields herself with her inner energy, yet she can still feel a chill that seems to pierce her very soul. And within this coldness, countless crisscrossing sword auras fill the air, causing the surrounding trees and grass to buckle under the sheer force of the impact. Branches snap and foliage falls, scattering debris across the ground. But the disciples of the Sword Sect fare much worse. Though their cultivation levels are similar to his, they have no strength to resist this overwhelming intent. As the aura sweeps past, they are frozen in various awkward positions, completely immobilized. Their faces are etched with terror and deep astonishment, their ability to move stripped away by the shock of the sword intent. It took only a single moment. More than 30 disciples of the Sword Sect have been rendered completely helpless. Seeing this, Qin Wuyao's face lights up with a mix of excitement and awe. It seems her master was right after all. If Qin Wuyao had any doubts before about whether Lu Ran was the genius her master spoke of, she is now certain. After all, this is true sword intent, something countless masters spend their entire lives seeking, yet even those at the peak of cultivation rarely manage to grasp it. And yet, Lu Ran has achieved it, while only at the foundation establishment stage. At this moment, he seems to have forgotten the disciples entirely, focused only on his blade. Memories of his 20 years in the great Luo sword sect flash through his mind, the warm days when his master, Su Yueling, accompanied him during practice. He remembers the meticulous care of his fellow disciples and the kind faces of the sect members, all appearing before him in a fleeting sequence. Until 10 years ago, everything changed the day his blocked meridians were discovered. He felt such unwillingness to let go, struggling for 10 long years to hold on to a place that didn't want him. Finally, he has truly woken up to the reality that the sect abandoned him long ago. A hall of guests and a chilling sword. The poetry reflects his lonely truth. From the moment he left the great Luo sword sect, he no longer had a family, friends, a master, or siblings. To be honest, he is truly alone now. He is a wanderer now, destined for a solitary life. Yet a grand ambition begins to grow within him. He has never craved true strength as much as he does right now. With a shout, he suddenly raises the tree branch in his hand and thrusts it toward the heavens, unleashing a strike that seems to chill the very air. The sword intent explodes against the sky in the middle of the night, summoning rolling thunder clouds as freezing sword auras swirl between heaven and earth. Crackling lightning pierces the firmament, and a terrifying river of sword energy weaves through the air like a soaring dragon, dominating the landscape. Watching this terrifying display, Qin Wuyao feels her heart tighten. What a frightening sword intent. The great Luo sword sect truly is a collection of fools. They had such a treasure and failed to cherish it. In time, Lu Ran will surely stand at the peak of the world, and the sword sect will realize their mistake. We can only wonder how the sect will react. Meanwhile, in Jinling City, several elders are startled from their quiet evening by a sudden, chilling realization. They look toward the eastern horizon, their faces turning pale at the sight of a terrifying celestial phenomenon. Such pure sword intent is unheard of. They ask themselves who could possess such power, for this freezing aura doesn't belong to any of the famous sword masters they know. Tears well up in their eyes as the fading sword intent drifts past, and a moment later, heavy snowflakes begin to fall from the high heavens. It is snowing. On this night, a single strike has caused snow to fall across 8 commanderies and 14 counties in the middle of summer. As the sword intent overflows the sky, the great Luo sword sect feels the greatest shock of all, given their proximity to Qingshi town at the mountain's foot. Being only 30 miles away from the sect's main peak, the dragon of sword energy roaring through the clouds looks as if it might strike at any moment. The faces of every disciple, from the inner sanctum to the outer sect, turn deathly white. In an instant, the elders and deacons are called to assemble. The hall managers gather in a panic, yet none of them have the slightest idea how to respond to this overwhelming, godlike display of power. A primal fear of the unknown settles deep in everyone's heart. Even the sect leader, Su Yueling, watches on with a look of grim gravity. The great elder asks in a low, trembling voice if this attack is aimed directly at their sect. Su Yueling isn't so sure, noting the purity of the intent. She observes that while the intent is vast, the killing blow is absent. The stranger is merely releasing spirit, not attacking with raw spiritual power. A rough-looking elder suggests sending scouts down the mountain to investigate the source, but Su Yueling immediately snaps at him for his foolishness. She asks him what right he has to investigate someone with such transcendent mastery. To be honest, such a move would be an insult to a superior being. She demands to know if he intends to lead the entire great Luo sword sect to its ruin. The elder turns pale and quickly falls silent, properly chastised. Meanwhile, Liang Xiaoyu stares at the towering sword intent with a furrowed brow, his face twisting with a dark, envious hunger for such power. He tells himself that such strength should belong to him alone. As the cold intensifies and the snow thickens, Su Yueling finds she cannot see the aura's end. The scale of it is simply too terrifying. She orders the disciples to take shifts on guard duty and to report any movement to her immediately. Su Yueling's voice rings out with authority, while beside her, Liang Xiaoyu suggests activating the Great Sect Protection Array. Despite his jealousy, he is actually scared to death. As the prince of the great Qin dynasty, his grand plans for the sect haven't even begun yet. He felt that if he were to be caught in the crossfire and swept away by a mere stray spark of power, it would be a truly pathetic way to go. It would be an utterly humiliating end, to be sure. Su Yueling continued her analysis, yet she simply couldn't fathom why the great Luo sword sect would have provoked a sword cultivator of such a terrifying level. That night, no one in the sect dared to relax. Fortunately, the sword intent soon dissipated, though the heavy snow continued to fall until dawn. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Qin Wuyao found a cave beneath a cliff at the foot of the mountain to shelter Lu Ran, who had fallen into a deep sleep after unleashing his strike. As morning broke, Qin Wuyao looked out at the snow-covered woods and took a deep breath, feeling the biting chill in the air. The midsummer temperature had been forced down by Lu Ran's sword intent alone, though she still had no idea just how much of a stir his actions had caused. She glanced at the snoring Lu Ran and flipped her wrist, revealing a compass in her hand as she prepared to send a message through her divine sense. At that same moment, in the Heavenly Mystery Pavilion, Yujizi was busy at the star observation platform, desperately trying to calculate the origin of that terrifying sword intent. However, her efforts yielded no results, as if a thick mist were blocking her spells. It was then that Qin Wuyao's voice transmission finally reached her. Upon hearing the report regarding Lu Ran, Yujizi froze in complete disbelief. The news was, to put it mildly, unexpected. Qin Wuyao explained that after getting drunk, Lu Ran had been intercepted by disciples of the Great Luo Sword Sect, only to release a sword intent that suppressed them all. More than 30 disciples, all at the late Foundation establishment stage, were instantly overwhelmed. Yujizi trembled, asking for clarification on what she had just heard. She asked if that sword intent from last night truly came from Lu Ran. She had assumed it was the work of some legendary grandmaster and had been trying to deduce their identity. To think that the source was actually Lu Ran, the disciple who just left the sect, a young man with a supposedly crippled meridian. It defied all logic. Qin Wuyao confirmed that she was right there and saw him release the energy with her own eyes. There was no mistake. The sheer scale of that sword intent was undeniable. While the rest of the world was busy guessing who the mysterious master was, it seemed no one would ever suspect the truth. And who could blame them, really? If Lu Ran truly is the one involved, the karmic implications are far too heavy for someone like Yujizi to calculate. She simply doesn't have the power. Qin Wuyao stepped out of the cave and looked up at the mountain, now completely buried under a blanket of white, feeling a deep sense of unease. As she watched the snow drift down, Qin Wuyao took a sharp breath, realizing that the range of Lu Ran's single strike was far wider than she had ever imagined. Remember, this is your great fortune. Yujizi's voice crackled through the transmission. Do not be negligent. Give her whatever she likes and satisfy her every whim. Qin Wuyao paused to consider what Lu Ran might actually like. Well, she replied quite simply. It's obvious. She likes wine. She loves to drink. Deep down, she was just thankful Lu Ran wasn't a lecher. Then give her wine, Yujizi agreed. In 3 days, doesn't the Heavenly Alliance hold the Wine King's banquet? Take her there and let her drink her fill. Qin Wuyao remembered the event, but noted that the Great Luo Sword Sect was also an affiliate of that same alliance. She worried they might cross paths, but Yujizi wasn't having it. Worry about what? From now on, the Heavenly Mystery Pavilion stands firmly behind Lu Ran. If that mere Great Luo Sword Sect dares to bark at her again, I'll make their entire sect pay the price. With that final declaration, Yujizi cut the connection. Returning to the cave, Qin Wuyao found that Lu Ran had just woken up and was rubbing her head. She recalled her master's instructions and decided to speak up. You are currently at the peak of the late Foundation establishment stage, she began. If you wish to form your core, there are 2 ways to go about it. Lu Ran's eyes lit up as she looked at Qin Wuyao, curious about these methods. But at that exact moment, a familiar voice echoed in her mind once more. She had successfully completed a night of heavy drinking, and the reward for her hangover was an immediate breakthrough. Lu Ran was, understandably, a bit stunned. An immediate breakthrough? To be honest, this reward seemed a bit absurd compared to the simple advice she received after her first drunken episode. Meanwhile, Qin Wuyao continued her explanation. The first method is through bitter cultivation, polishing your power until you finally shatter the barrier to the core realm. The second is to use a core-breaking pill to force your way through. However, such pills are incredibly rare and difficult to obtain. Qin Wuyao gave a mysterious little smile. She happened to have one on her and intended to offer it as a favor, but she didn't get the chance. Before she could finish her sentence, a golden halo of light erupted from Lu Ran's body, signaling an instantaneous advancement in her cultivation. It seems these rewards are tailored to her current state rather than being random. This means that as her level rises, she can simply drink to bypass the hardest bottlenecks, which, naturally, makes the traditional path of cultivation look a bit silly. Lu Ran then looked back at Qin Wuyao. Right? You were saying you happen to have, what? Nothing. It's nothing, Qin Wuyao muttered, waving her hand dismissively. As they officially introduced themselves, Lu Ran finally learned her companion's name. After finding out she was Qin Wuyao, Lu Ran couldn't help but ask why she was being so kind. The answer she received, however, was simply because of fate. She explained that as a fellow wine lover, she simply couldn't leave a drunkard behind, and since she was free, she decided to stay for the company. Lu Ran's eyes sparkled, realizing she'd found a kindred spirit, which explained the massive wine stash. She then asked if Qin Wuyao had handled those sect disciples last night. Qin Wuyao realized that Lu Ran must have been so intoxicated during her display of sword intent that she had no memory of what happened afterward. She hesitated, wondering if she should take the credit, but ultimately shook her head. She admitted she hadn't even stepped in before Lu Ran's own sword intent terrified them. Lu Ran was slightly shaken. She vaguely remembered venting her grief through her sword, but she couldn't recall how she had actually incapacitated her pursuers. There were over 30 of them, all at the late Foundation stage. To think she had suppressed them all while drunk, and without a scratch, it was quite a feat. Do you want more wine? Qin Wuyao asked, pulling out another jar. Lu Ran, curious to test her limits, decided to give it a try. She took the jar and swallowed a massive gulp. But when the notification appeared, granting only 2 hours of cultivation for cheap wine, she nearly choked. In the chi refining stage, a bowl gave a year. In foundation, a sip gave days. Now that she had reached the golden core stage, a huge gulp barely gave 2 hours. Worse yet, at this level, her body automatically neutralized the impurities of cheap wine, making it impossible to even get a hangover. To be honest, that's a bit of a tragedy. It seemed cheap wine had finally met its limit. Lu Ran set the jar aside and shook her head, declaring that this brew was simply too poor for her now. She told Qin Wuyao they needed better wine, advising her to avoid the cheap stuff as it was bad for the health. Qin Wuyao could only roll her eyes at that. Deep down, she was thinking about who exactly was chugging that same cheap stuff back at the tavern. However, she saw her opening and changed the subject. She mentioned that in 3 days, the Heavenly Alliance would host the Wine King's Banquet, featuring century-old vintages, and suggested they go together. The Heavenly Alliance was a subordinate of the Nine Solitaries' Holy Land, and Lu Ran remembered that the Great Luo Sword Sect was also an affiliate, a small fish in a big pond. This meant her former sect would likely be there, but she didn't care. She had left them behind, and they no longer had anything to do with her. 3 days later, at the foot of Mount Li in Sangyan City, we see our 2 companions leaving their inn and heading toward the eastern gate. This path led through the mountain passes toward the martial god hall of the Heavenly Alliance. It was a scenic route if one enjoyed steep climbs. The banquet wasn't set to begin until noon, but many groups were already departing Sangyan City, all sharing the same prestigious destination. Most groups were small, ranging from 3 to 8 people. A pair like Lu Ran and Qin Wuyao traveling alone was a bit of a rare sight. And yet, we see that Lu Ran was already growing impatient for those century-old vintages, as her mouth had felt utterly tasteless over these past 3 days. She had sampled some local brews in Sangyan City, but the quality was mediocre at best, making her look forward to the Wine King's Banquet even more. While other sects attended merely to flatter the Heavenly Alliance, Lu Ran was driven by pure anticipation as she and Qin Wuyao prepared to set off on foot. However, just as they cleared the city gates, several horses suddenly pulled up beside them. A voice called out, asking if that wasn't Lu Ran trying to make a living here. The provocative voice belonged to her former senior sister, Wang Yujiao. Lu Ran looked up and realized she had run into some very familiar faces. Beside Wang Yujiao were Liang Xiaoyu, Su Yueling, and several other disciples and elders attendants from her old sect. The high-level leadership hadn't come. Instead, Sect Master Su Yueling was leading a group of core disciples. Lu Ran, however, couldn't be bothered to acknowledge them. She simply turned to leave, which caused Wang Yujiao to frown and bark a command to stop, urging her horse forward to block the path. But at that critical moment, Qin Wuyao stepped forward, meeting Wang Yujiao's gaze with a look so cold it could freeze the air. In that instant of eye contact, Wang Yujiao felt a piercing pain in her soul, as if her mind were being torn apart, forcing her to look away in terror. Her horse began to whinny and panic, but Su Yueling quickly stepped in, using a surge of spiritual energy to calm the beast while telling the group to stop. She remarked that since Lu Ran was no longer a disciple of the Sword Sect, they shouldn't linger. Lu Ran simply chuckled, casting a knowing glance at Su Yueling. It was quite convenient. Su Yueling had stayed silent while Wang Yujiao was being difficult, only choosing to intervene once her own side was intimidated. Liang Xiaoyu then spoke up with a forced smile, noting that since senior brother Lu Ran was born with blocked meridians, life must be difficult for him. He turned his attention to Qin Wuyao, greeting her as Lu Ran's new friend and mentioning that despite leaving the sect, Lu Ran was still his senior. He kindly asked the lady to look after Lu Ran given his physical limitations, even offering his thanks on Lu Ran's behalf. To be honest, it was quite a performance. Lu Ran found it utterly speechless. Liang Xiaoyu seemed polite, but he was constantly reminding Qin Wuyao of Lu Ran's supposed weakness to drive a wedge between them. It was as if he believed Lu Ran wasn't even worthy of having friends. Liang Xiaoyu then smoothly asked what the two of them were doing in Sangyan City. Qin Wuyao replied indifferently that they were there for the same reason as everyone else. Liang Xiaoyu's eyes lit up, calling it a wonderful coincidence. Assuming they were also heading to the Wine King's Banquet, he suggested they join their group, even boasting that his horse was a rare and valuable prize. Beside them, Wang Yujiao's expression soured. She craved Liang Xiaoyu's favor and hated seeing him extend an olive branch to a complete stranger. Her heart stung with jealousy, but before she could speak, Qin Wuyao cut in, asking if he didn't think he was being a bit inappropriate. She bluntly asked if she even knew him, telling him that sharing a horse was out of the question. To be honest, she had no patience for him. Qin Wuyao despised those who wore a gentle mask over a filthy heart, and having investigated Lu Ran's past, she knew exactly who Liang Xiaoyu was. Naturally, she intended to give Lu Ran all the face he deserved. Liang Xiaoyu's face darkened with embarrassment, though he tried to laugh it off. He turned back to Lu Ran, noting that since the great Luo sword sect was invited to the banquet and Lu Ran was no longer a disciple, he lacked the status to attend. He asked the lady once more if she truly wouldn't join them for such a prestigious event. Qin Wuyao simply burst out laughing at the suggestion. She asked how he could judge Lu Ran's status while assuming she had none. She told him flatly that she would be the one taking Lu Ran there. Telling him to mind his own business, she pulled Lu Ran toward a nearby stable and called out for a horse, one large enough for two to ride. Liang Xiaoyu's expression grew even more unsightly. His attempts to drive a wedge between them had failed, and his charms had been utterly rejected. He had to maintain his humble persona and dared not lose his temper, though his internal rage made his forced smile look quite distorted. Sui Welling finally spoke up in a low voice, telling Xiaoyu it was time to go. He nodded, though his pride was clearly wounded. Wang Yujiao seized the chance to defend Xiaoyu's dignity, scoffing that a man with blocked meridians and a sharp-tongued girl made a perfect pair. Sui Welling remained silent at the remark, but her expression had become uncharacteristically solemn as she watched the two of them. We see that she had secretly tried to probe the girl's cultivation level with her divine sense, only to find she couldn't see through her at all. This implied the girl's realm might be higher than her own, which was troubling, as Sui Welling was already at the peak of the late nascent soul stage. She was only a step away from a breakthrough. If this girl was truly stronger, it meant she had reached the spirit-severing stage. Furthermore, she had caught a glimpse of Lu Ran's aura and sensed the golden core stage, but that was impossible for someone with blocked meridians. She told herself she must have been mistaken. No one jumps from the chi refining stage to a golden core in just a few days. While Qin Wuyao could see Lu Ran's 5 golden cores clearly, Sui Welling could only guess from the aura. Meanwhile, the stable master brought out a fine steed. As the horse was led before them, we see Lu Ran looking quite excited at the prospect of sharing a ride, but Qin Wuyao quickly shut that idea down with a sharp glare. She watched until the great Luo sword sect group had vanished into the distance before turning back to the stable master to order a second horse, much to Lu Ran's disappointment. He rolled his eyes, but then looked at Wu Yao's profile and quietly thanked her. 10 years ago, after his blocked meridians were discovered, his world had crumbled. From that moment on, he had been abandoned by everyone, ignored by the world as the former genius fell to the very bottom of the social ladder. He had become a mere tool for others to mock, and while Wang Yujiao and Liang Xiaoyu targeted him openly and secretly, his former master remained silent. Sui Welling, who once took him as a personal disciple, hadn't said a word to defend him. Instead, it was this girl he'd known for only days who stood by him. Deep down, he felt truly grateful. Qin Wuyao hesitated for a few seconds before simply stating that this was how things should be, given his hidden potential. She noted that if his true talent were revealed, factions from here to the central continent would be lining up to protect him. Meanwhile, the banquet preparations were complete. The massive square at the Martial God Hall was filled with tables and chairs, each meticulously engraved with the unique insignia of various sects and clans. As the guests took their seats, some disciples wandered the perimeter to network and build connections before the Nine Kings banquet officially commenced. It is worth noting that the seating was arranged strictly by status. The closer a sect was to the front, the higher its standing in the cultivation world. The great Luo sword sect found themselves positioned toward the back. Sui Welling didn't sit immediately, choosing instead to lead her disciples around to socialize. She exchanged pleasantries with various sects, even lowering her posture to offer flattery when meeting higher-ranking groups to ensure the atmosphere remained harmonious. Lu Ran and Qin Wuyao, however, were in no rush, taking a leisurely ride along the mountain paths and only arriving just as the event was about to start. By then, most sects were already seated. Lu Ran glanced at the insignias on the nearby tables and casually asked Wuyao which table belonged to them. Just as he spoke, the group from the great Luo sword sect happened to pass by. Sui Welling caught sight of him, and her expression immediately turned solemn. She glanced toward Qin Wuyao, clearly trying to calculate the girl's true strength and background, though the answers remained frustratingly out of reach. At the same time, Wang Yujiao noticed Liang Xiaoyu's face growing darker by the second, and she began to feel a creeping sense of panic. She knew that the 30 inner court disciples she had sent to intercept Lu Ran had all mysteriously lost contact, meaning her plan had utterly failed. Liang Xiaoyu had already grown impatient with Yu Jiao's inefficiency, and seeing Lu Ran arrive unharmed only made his temper more difficult to suppress. Wang Yujiao quickly seized the opportunity to show off, raising her eyebrows and mocking Lu Ran with a cold tone, asking if he truly dared to show up there. She sneered that a man born with blocked meridians had no place at the Nine Kings banquet, suggesting his skin had grown thick from being a kept man. To everyone's surprise, Lu Ran stepped forward and sharply rebuked her, leaving the great Luo sword sect members stunned while other sects began to gather. It was quite a scene. After all, witnessing someone face such ridicule at the Nine Kings banquet and actually fight back was enough to make anyone's jaw drop. Wang Yujiao's face twisted with rage in an instant, her eyes fixed on Lu Ran with pure venom as she hissed, questioning how he dared to reprimand her. Lu Ran felt a flicker of self-mockery. Yu Jiao was only at the early golden core stage, and with his current strength, he wasn't afraid of her at all. Since he had long since left the sect, he felt no need to yield to her anymore, coldly responding that they were no longer connected in any way. He told her that if she remained disrespectful, he would have to teach her a lesson, which caused Yu Jiao to draw her sword while her teeth literally chattered with fury. She declared that since they were strangers, she would make him pay the price, but unexpectedly, Qin Wuyao stepped forward with an appreciative glance toward Lu Ran. She then looked at Wang Yujiao, noting that since Lu Ran was no longer a disciple, Yujiao was simply looking for trouble and deserved the rebuke. Wang Yujiao glared at Qin Wuyao, demanding to know who she was and mocking her for associating with a man born with blocked meridians. She claimed that birds of a feather flock together, but Qin Wuyao simply raised her hand to silence her with a sharp, commanding gesture. With that single movement, the chaotic scene fell silent, prompting Lu Ran to curiously ask if she happened to be left-handed. Qin Wuyao casually replied that she wasn't, she just did it for the sake of symmetry, a brief exchange that made the surrounding sect members burst into laughter. Su Yueling's expression turned grim as she watched the great Luo sword sect become a public laughingstock. She knew she had to step in to save face. She looked coldly at Qin Wuyao, stating that as the sect master, she was offended that the girl and Lu Ran would dare to treat her disciples with such contempt. She declared that such behavior was entirely inappropriate and could not be overlooked. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a blade. She vowed to make them pay, but Lu Ran could see through her bravado. This was the Nine Kings banquet, and the Saint Soul, Yin Tianxing, was present. If a private fight broke out and displeased Yin Tianxing, things would end badly, a rule that Su Yueling understood all too well deep down. Taking a deep breath, Su Yueling responded coldly, demanding to know which sect the girl belonged to, as the great Luo sword sect would certainly remember this day. It was clear she intended to settle the score later. Even if she lacked the confidence to follow through, she had to act tough to save the sect's reputation. If she could reclaim even a shred of dignity, it would be a win, but Qin Wuyao simply chuckled and gave a lighthearted reply. She introduced herself as Qin Wuyao of the Tianji Pavilion, adding that she, too, would remember this encounter, and suddenly, the guest's expression shifted. Imagine the shock of seeing Qin Wuyao in person. She was the little princess of the great Qin dynasty and the holy maiden of the Jade Lake. Beyond that, she was the direct disciple of the Tianji Pavilion master, and now everyone looked at Su Yueling with nothing but pity. The great Luo sword sect was a minor player compared to such power. To speak of remembering a grudge against the Tianji Pavilion was laughable. Crossing Qin Wuyao meant making enemies of three massive powers at once, turning the sect into a mere footnote in history. Su Yueling's face turned pale, yet Wang Yujiao, failing to read the room, continued to shout that Qin Wuyao was just like Lu Ran. Su Yueling immediately intervened with a sharp command, her entire body trembling as the color drained completely from her face. With that harsh rebuke, Wang Yujiao froze instantly, and the atmosphere in the hall became incredibly tense. Su Yueling then turned to Qin Wuyao, bowing her head in a display of total submission and apologizing, claiming she hadn't known her true identity. She insisted it was all a misunderstanding, her voice thick with a desperation that we can all recognize as pure panic. She understood better than anyone that if this young lady were truly offended, the Jade Lake or the Tianji Pavilion wouldn't even need to act. The invincible cavalry of the great Qin dynasty alone could trample the great Luo sword sect's home into the dust. Meanwhile, Liang Xiaoyu stood nearby acting calm, though deep down, his mind was racing. He was far too calculating to join this losing battle. Instead, he maintained a peaceful facade, secretly feeling relieved that he had avoided being dragged into the center of the conflict. However, seeing Qin Wuyao support Lu Ran so grandly sparked a jealousy in him that was almost impossible to suppress. Lu Ran was the man they had cast out, yet now he had the favor of the most radiant girl in the room, a fact that left them fuming. Qin Wuyao then delivered a final, stinging remark, stating there was no need for explanation since they were the ones who had discarded Lu Ran. She noted that she hadn't wanted to speak, but their constant insults and need to cause trouble, one after another, had become impossible to ignore. Su Yueling had been Lu Ran's master, yet now she refused to say a single word in his defense, a betrayal that could hardly be called a misunderstanding. We see that even without connections in the great Luo sword sect, the shift in the room makes it clear that Qin Wuyao's background is truly extraordinary. Desperate, Su Yueling bowed repeatedly, promising to treat Lu Ran better in the future, but she was cut off before she could finish. Qin Wuyao waved her hand dismissively, telling them all to simply stay far away from Lu Ran from now on. Since he was no longer part of their sect, his future status was something these minor figures couldn't even imagine. They lived in different worlds now. Then, she turned a cold, majestic gaze toward Wang Yujiao, warning her that if she ever spoke another ill word about Lu Ran, there would be a heavy price to pay, and she wasn't joking. Finally, she looked back at Su Yueling, challenging her to try and oppose her. In this moment, Qin Wuyao's aura exploded. She was no longer the playful girl we saw earlier, but a figure of absolute authority. Her overwhelming pressure made the hair on the necks of the great Luo Sword Sect members stand on end as they trembled before her. Everyone fell into a terrified silence, and a pale, shaking Su Yueling cast a hesitant, pleading look toward Lu Ran for help. But he only watched her calmly, thinking to himself that after how she had treated him, there was no reason to care about her helplessness now. Eventually, Liang Xiaoyu couldn't help but step forward to try and smooth things over, offering a fake smile and a respectful nod to Qin Wuyao. He apologized on behalf of the sect, asking her not to take it to heart since Lu Ran was, after all, a former fellow disciple. He tried to claim they were all friends of friends, but Qin Wuyao raised her hand and impatiently cut him off mid-sentence. She coldly repeated that Lu Ran had no connection to them anymore, and that people like Liang Xiaoyu shouldn't dream of being her friend. His attempt to build a bridge had failed miserably, leaving his face looking darker than the bottom of a scorched pot. Suddenly, a ripple of movement stirred the crowd, and as we look back, we see a woman in red with a graceful silhouette approaching. Her beauty was so breathtaking that it seemed to steal the focus of everyone in the room, and the hall quickly fell into a hushed silence. This was Yan Tianxing, one of the 10 Yama kings of the 9 Miles Holy Land, and the formidable leader of the Heavenly Tao Alliance. Looking at the crowd with a cold, displeased expression, she asked why there was still such a commotion when the 9 Kings banquet was about to begin. Seeing her, Wang Yujiao suddenly pointed at Lu Ran and Qin Wuyao like a cornered dog, screaming that they were the ones causing all the trouble. She begged the alliance leader not to let them get away with bullying others, a bold claim, to say the least. In the next second, Yan Tianxing turned her gaze toward the two of them, while Lu Ran simply tilted his head with a faint, curious smile. He wondered if the sun had risen in the west today, seeing even Qin Wuyao show up, but before he could finish the thought, things took a turn. Qin Wuyao waved her hand at Yan Tianxing with a hint of embarrassment, calling her Aunt Yan and pleading with her not to start lecturing again. She explained that she finally had the chance to visit, and since she loved wine so much, she intended to drink her fill this time. She even introduced Lu Ran as a fellow drinking enthusiast, claiming he was a top-tier expert when it came to the bottle. This left Yan Tianxing momentarily stunned, looking at Qin Wuyao with suspicion and wondering when the girl had developed such a hobby. While the alliance leader was still puzzled, Qin Wuyao gave her a clever little wink, signaling her to focus her attention on Lu Ran instead. After a brief scrutiny, Yan Tianxing understood everything, while the nearby sect members stood frozen with faces more bitter than a dried gourd. Lu Ran realized that based on their tone, the relationship between these two women was incredibly close, practically family. In fact, for Wang Yujiao to try and smear them in front of Yan Tianxing was a suicidal move, yet the alliance leader simply nodded in response. She invited them both to sit at her own table to taste her special Immortal's brew, since they were friends brought by her dear Wu Yao. The entire hall erupted in a hushed uproar, as we know that sitting at the same table as Yan Tianxing is an honor reserved for very few. Qin Wuyao's status was already clear, but Lu Ran had only recently been cast out of his sect, a fact everyone present was well aware of. He had gone from being a neglected, low-ranking disciple to sitting beside the leader of the Heavenly Tao Alliance, all because of his connection to Wu Yao. It was more than just a polite gesture. It was a massive leap in status that meant he could now walk tall anywhere in Yan Tianxing's territory. The members of the great Luo Sword Sect fell into a terrified silence, their expressions turning incredibly ugly as the reality set in. They were forced to find seats in a lonely corner, watching with envy as Lu Ran and Qin Wuyao took their places at the head table. We look back and remember that although he chose to leave the great Luo Sword Sect, these past 10 years were far from kind to him. He was mocked and bullied at every turn due to his blocked meridians, even losing his jade bees, and was nearly left to rot in the mountains. They were the ones who pushed him off the cliff, yet now they can only watch as he soars to new heights. It is a moment of pure, silent triumph. This is what it looks like to truly rewrite one's destiny. Meanwhile, Liang Xiaoyu's face grew darker as he struggled to suppress a rising tide of fury. He gritted his teeth so hard they nearly shattered, glancing at the swollen-faced old Bao and the equally resentful Wang Yujiao, while cursing them internally. He blamed these useless people for failing to handle a boy with blocked meridians, allowing Lu Ran to snatch a golden opportunity right from under them. As for Sect Master Su Yueling, her mood was even more clouded. She had assumed everything would end once Lu Ran left the sect. But Wang Yujiao kept stirring up trouble, dragging the sect's reputation through the mud. Su Yueling had hoped this banquet would help build connections. Instead, she had completely shot herself in the foot. Who would dare associate with the Sword Sect now? She silently swore an oath of vengeance. She decided to deal with Wang Yujiao the moment they returned, though deep down, she felt a flicker of guilt for never stopping the girl's antics before. Unbeknownst to her, Wang Yujiao had no idea she had become the secret punching bag for Xiaoyu and Su Yueling's frustrations. She simply held her face and offered her master some misplaced comfort, telling her not to worry about Lu Ran just because he found a powerful patron. She claimed someone like Qin Wuyao would eventually fall, and that their sect still had great hope of joining a super sect in the future. She even boasted they would surpass the Heavenly Tao Alliance one day. Sui Welling nearly lost her composure, feeling the sting of utter humiliation. She forced herself to remain silent, knowing the great Luo sword sect had already become a laughingstock and wishing only for the moment to pass. Lu Ran, however, paid no mind to these trivial internal squabbles as he walked side by side with Qin Wuyao toward the head table. As they took their seats, he nudged Qin Wuyao with his elbow and whispered that he hadn't realized she carried so much weight around here. Though he knew little of the various sects and powers, even a blind man could see that Qin Wuyao's status was absurdly high. Hearing this, she tilted her head with a proud little grin, telling him that as long as he followed her, there would always be wine to drink. He gave her a thumbs up and laughed, deciding he might as well enjoy the good fortune that came with being her friend. Lu Ran's heart was full of gratitude. After all, without Qin Wuyao's help, he never would have stepped through the doors of this Nine Kings banquet. For others, this was just a glamorous event, but for him, it was a chance to completely rewrite his story and evolve into a new stage of life. Meanwhile, as Yin Tianxin took his seat on the high platform, the guests fell silent instantly, and the very air seemed to freeze in anticipation. We hear him call out for Wu Yao and Lu Ran to sit nearby, and as they find their places, they realize the table is already quite full. 5 others were already seated, 1 woman and 4 men, all dressed magnificently, their powerful auras radiating from beside Yin Tianxin with deep intensity. They all cast measuring glances at Lu Ran, who noticed that these heavyweights were all sword cultivators, each possessing a formidable and sharp presence. Their eyes were sharp enough to see through his blocked meridians, yet they were baffled to find a golden core stage cultivator among them. It was unheard of for someone with blocked meridians to reach such a level, and they began to suspect that Lu Ran held some profound, hidden secrets. He glanced at these masters, realizing they were likely Yin Tianxin's old friends, and noted that this banquet certainly didn't lack for prestige. Though he said nothing, he counted the heads, including Yin Tianxin and Qin Wuyao. There were exactly 8 people gathered at this elite table. The atmosphere was just right, and Lu Ran found himself swallowing hard, eagerly waiting for the legendary wine to finally make its grand appearance. Fortunately, Yin Tianxin didn't indulge in a long-winded speech. He simply hummed a few opening words and waved his hand to start the service. As the gathering truly began, a maid placed a flask before Lu Ran, offering him a sweet smile before gracefully making her exit. The guests below received their wine as well, but no one dared to move, waiting for the host's signal, though Lu Ran could hardly contain his excitement. He quickly poured himself a full cup and took a deep breath of the aroma, feeling his mind clear instantly as the scent reached his soul. To be honest, he wasn't a true alcoholic, but the system had essentially forced him to become a wine immortal through sheer necessity. He tilted his head back and drained the cup in one go, and immediately, a familiar system notification echoed deep within his mind. His eyes lit up when he saw that drinking this 10-year brew had granted him 3 years of cultivation, a staggering reward for a single cup. He remembered the cheap wine back in Qingshi Town only gave 1 year per bowl. At this rate, a full bowl of this would be worth a decade. He nearly slapped the table in delight, realizing this drunken immortal brew was the real deal, while he struggled to hide his growing joy. However, Yin Tianxin's lips curled into a slightly awkward smile as he explained that this wasn't actually the drunken immortal brew yet, but just an ordinary drink. The legendary brew was far too precious to be wasted on casual drinking, and his words made it clear that the crowd below simply didn't have the status to taste it. Upon hearing this, Lu Ran's eyes lit up with excitement as he realized that if this incredible liquid was considered ordinary, then the real prize must be divine. If the standard configuration was already this potent, the drunken immortal brew would surely be god tier. Shortly after, Yin Tianxin officially declared the banquet open. With the food and wine ready, the guests began to enjoy themselves as the atmosphere grew heated, while Lu Ran curiously scanned the gathered crowd. He muttered to himself, wondering how the Wine King would actually be chosen, just as Yin Tianxin added a sharp comment to the proceedings. The air turned subtle as he asked if anyone had objections, but Lu Ran wasn't worried. The 10-year brew in his hand had already provided plenty of surprises. He kept his cup close, happily draining one after another, and his focused intensity even caused Yin Tianxin to raise an eyebrow in surprise. To be honest, while this wine wasn't the absolute peak, it was still incredibly strong to any outsider, especially for the various sects gathered below. While everyone else sipped cautiously to savor the flavor, Lu Ran was gulping it down like a common soft drink, emptying his flask at a startling speed. This caused Yin Tianxin to reevaluate him, thinking that Qin Wuyao hadn't been exaggerating. The boy truly was a bit of a wine devil. Consequently, Yin Tianxin found himself liking the young man more, while Lu Ran silently tracked the system notifications with every swallow. This single flask of ordinary wine had actually granted him over 20 years of cultivation, leaving his dantian and sea of consciousness nearly overflowing. Beside him, Qin Wuyao sensed something was off and glanced over, wondering if her eyes were playing tricks on her as his aura began to shift. His presence was surging from the early golden core stage straight toward the late stage, even though he had only just broken through before sitting down. Yin Tianxin and the others didn't immediately notice the change in his aura, as their curiosity was mostly focused on his connection to Qin Wuyao. In the eyes of such masters, the difference between the early and late golden core stage was negligible, so Lu Ran took the chance to survey the room. He realized he was the fastest drinker in the entire hall, his flask hitting empty with lightning speed, yet one flask wasn't enough for a cultivation maniac. His eyes sparkled as he shot a subtle look toward Qin Wuyao, and she, immediately catching his drift, didn't hesitate to act. With a calm expression, she pushed her own flask toward him, claiming she didn't care for it much, which made Lu Ran's eyes beam with pure joy. He accepted the gift with a polite grin, grabbing the flask and thanking her profusely, his face beaming with such genuine delight that it was almost comical. Qin Wuyao began to wonder if she had handed him a legendary treasure rather than just a drink, while Yin Tianxin watched their little exchange with an amused smile. Just then, the maids reappeared on the scene, but this time they carried only a single tray, upon which sat a lone, silent jar of wine. The jar was carved from translucent jade and surrounded by a swirling mist, giving it an ethereal glow that immediately elevated the entire atmosphere. As several disciples quickly set up a star-patterned table on the high platform, Lu Ran was still busy tilting back Qin Wuyao's flask for another long drink. He didn't even bother with a cup, standing out from the crowd as his cultivation surged with every swallow, which, to be honest, felt a bit like cheating. While others spent years in bitter meditation, he was essentially drinking spiritual energy like a common milk tea. Then, Yin Tianxin stood up as the jade jar was set down. The host personally poured a brimming cup and announced to the entire hall that this was the centerpiece of the Wine King banquet. She explained it was her own special brew, and any challenger who could drink a single cup and remain standing for 10 breaths would be the winner. The air in the room instantly reached a fever pitch, but the excitement only grew when Yin Tianxin raised her hand and summoned a brilliant object. A deep blue longsword landed in her grip, its design sleek and elegant, yet radiating a cold, treasure-like luster that felt dangerously sharp. A chilling aura washed over the guests as she held the weapon aloft, introducing it as the Rainfall Cold Sword, a divine artifact of the profound rank. She kept her description brief, but the revelation of its origin hit the crowd like a physical weight, leaving many of them struggling to catch their breath. Who wouldn't want to claim such a divine weapon? Lu Ran felt a surge of desire as he stared at the blade, his heart racing with anticipation. As a sword cultivator currently lacking a truly suitable weapon, this Rainfall Cold Sword seemed to be a perfect match for his own icy techniques. It felt as though the artifact had been custom-made for him, and he was just about to leap up and accept the challenge when a hand stopped him. Fine wine and a legendary weapon. It seemed like a gift from the heavens, but just as he prepared to move, Qin Wuyao reached out to hold him back. She whispered a warning that the wine used for this challenge was a legendary spirit, so potent it could knock a person out instantly. She told him to think twice before rushing in, leaving him stunned. He hadn't realized the Wine King title came with such a hellish difficulty spike. It turns out the title was earned only by those who could survive Yin Tianxin's trial, a feat very few could ever hope to achieve. We see that while the prize is grand, the guests are no fools. They know Yin Tianxin wouldn't just hand out such a treasure without a catch. Surviving 10 breaths is clearly a limit set after rounds of increasing difficulty, which explains why the Wine King banquet is so legendary every year. Everyone present understands just how potent this sinner's brew really is, and they exchange cautious glances, with no one daring to step forward first. Lu Ran looks around and realizes that most of these people aren't newcomers. They know that becoming the Wine King is never an easy feat. Although the wine Yin Tianxin produced is of the highest quality, it is also a lethal concoction with explosive power, a truly dangerous combination. To be honest, it's a bit terrifying. He had even heard rumors that in previous banquets, the challenge was almost too much to handle. Suddenly, a man steps up and bows to the crowd, introducing himself as Su Jia, master of the Greatsword Sect, ready to test the brew. Lu Ran finds the sect's name amusingly blunt, while Yin Tianxin simply smiles and calmly gestures for him to take his place at the table. She had already filled the cup to the brim, and as Su Jia approaches, the intense aroma hits him instantly, momentarily sharpening his senses. We can see that despite his calm exterior, he is actually quite nervous. Su Jia takes a deep breath and drains the cup in one go. For a brief moment, Su Jia looks confident, as if he has conquered the challenge and is ready to claim his prize. Then, he suddenly freezes before collapsing to his knees, clutching his chest and panting like an exhausted beast as sweat pours down his face. His spiritual energy begins to spiral out of control like boiling water, and a series of popping sounds echo from within his body as he trembles. Turning deathly pale, Su Jia slumps to the ground in the blink of an eye, tumbling off the high platform in a state of total collapse. The disciples of the Tiandao sect drag him away without a word, leaving Lu Ran wide-eyed and wondering if that was actually wine or a weapon. It's a bit extreme, to say the least, as the drink nearly crippled the man. Beside him, Qin Wuyao watches with a much more composed expression. She understands the situation far better than he does, and she quietly explains that he shouldn't view this as a mere beverage. The brewing process involves rare ingredients that make the wine as fierce as a wild beast, though the benefits are immense for those who can endure it. Su Jie's cultivation was simply too limited to suppress the alcohol, and now his meridians are damaged, likely stalling his future progress. As Lu Ran listens, a sudden thought flashes through his mind. While others fear the wine burning their meridians, he was born with his already blocked. For Lu Ran, that particular risk simply doesn't exist. With his system acting as a safeguard, the fierce wine that others can't handle might not trouble him at all. As Su Jie's disastrous attempt concludes, the faces of those below the stage turn grim, especially the disciples who were just preparing to step up. Now, they are all hesitating. The rewards are tempting, but one must stay alive to enjoy them, lest they end up like Su Jie, losing everything for nothing. We notice that this year's Wine King banquet features a brew from Yen Tianxin that is far more potent than previous years, a deliberate and intense upgrade. Seeing the atmosphere grow cold, Yen Tianxin frowns slightly and asks if anyone else dares to take the challenge, noting that while the brew is strong, she is adding an extra reward. Any successful challenger will secure a batch of top-tier resources for their entire sect. Upon hearing this, the crowd's emotions stir instantly. Everyone wants their sect to rise in power, perhaps even enough to suppress their rivals once and for all. Finally, a new challenger emerges from the crowd. Everyone turns to look, and it turns out to be a familiar face from the Great Luo Sword Sect. It is Liang Xiaoyu, the disciple who was looked down upon earlier. Looking at him, it seems his actions are driven largely by a sense of jealousy. He is clearly trying to prove something to those who doubted him, and so, he steps forward to reclaim his pride. He walks directly onto the high platform, bowing to Yen Tianxin and the other masters as he introduces himself as Liang Xiaoyu of the Great Luo Sword Sect. He claims to possess a natural constitution that he hopes will endure the brew. The atmosphere becomes subtle as the masters show surprise at his boldness. Only Qin Wuyao remains calm, her eyes revealing that she had already seen through his intentions. Lu Ran isn't surprised either, given their history. Years ago, when Lu Ran was found to have blocked meridians, Liang Xiaoyu jumped at the chance to steal the spotlight with his own innate talent. While his constitution isn't the absolute peak for a sword cultivator, he was still considered a highly gifted prospect within the sect's ranks. Because of this, he replaced Lu Ran, becoming Su Yueling's personal disciple and the Great Luo Sword Sect's great hope for the future. Meanwhile, we see Su Yueling's expression gradually darkening. She sees right through him and knows Liang Xiaoyu isn't here just for the wine. This is another calculated display of vanity. By emphasizing his innate constitution, he hopes to catch the eye of a legendary master who might take him in. If a high-level expert were to offer him discipleship, Su Yueling wouldn't be able to stop him, leaving her feeling quite uneasy about his true motives. Whether this was a long premeditated scheme or not, the taste is clearly unbearable. Yen Tianxin's eyes flash with a cold disdain as she watches Liang Xiaoyu's smug display. She speaks with a flat, unimpressed tone, noting that while an innate constitution offers a slight advantage against the brew's power, that edge is actually quite negligible. Since he is so determined to challenge it, she decides to let the trial begin. Yen Tianxin personally pours another full cup of the potent brew with a firm hand. We see Lu Ran watching closely. He understands Liang Xiaoyu far too well and sees through his vanity instantly. Unfortunately for the challenger, things won't go as planned. Lu Ran's memories of a 100-year dream clearly reveal that no legendary master ever took an interest in Liang Xiaoyu, nor did anyone ever recruit him from his sect. Instead, Lu Ran remembers a specific time when Su Yueling took Liang Xiaoyu, Wang Yujiao, and other disciples away for over a week for a very specific reason. It took Su Yueling a great deal of effort to help Liang Xiaoyu recover from damaged meridians. Thinking back, it must have happened right here at this Wine King banquet. Furthermore, in that past dream, the Great Luo Sword Sect never gained any rare resources. In other words, Liang Xiaoyu's grand challenge is destined for total failure. Not only will he fail, but the brew will shatter his meridians. He is about to lose his pride and his health all at once. To be honest, it's a heavy price for vanity. Soon enough, Liang Xiaoyu looks like he's about to cry from regret. The ferocity of the immortal brew is far more overwhelming than he ever dared to imagine. As the liquid hits his stomach, his spiritual power explodes, surging violently through his body. What others see as a blessing becomes a deadly poison if one cannot endure it. In the blink of an eye, Liang Xiaoyu's skin turns a dark, sickly hue and begins to wrinkle and distort. It is a truly gruesome sight for everyone watching. The masters on the stage immediately begin to whisper among themselves as they witness his condition. They recognize the signs of a failing body. His specialized wood spirit constitution is clearly reaching its limit, and the strain is becoming visible to the entire crowd. His face turns deathly pale as blood trickles from his mouth and his veins bulge painfully. Watching this, Lu Ran can't help but comment internally on the sheer intensity of the brew. He thinks to himself that this brew is truly something else, and Liang Xiaoyu was incredibly reckless to try this. This attempt to gain attention has backfired spectacularly. Liang Xiaoyu, hearing the murmurs of the crowd, is nearly exploding with rage. He wanted to be the hero, but instead, his pretension has been stripped bare. His boast about his wood spirit constitution has turned into an embarrassing disaster, made worse by the fact that it's happening right in front of Lu Ran, whom he despises. The sense of humiliation is nearly unbearable for him. At this critical moment, Sui Welling suddenly flashes onto the high platform to intervene. Yan Tianxin's gaze turns icy as she looks at Sui Welling, reminding her firmly that no one may interfere during a challenge, causing the tension to skyrocket. The tension is thick, but Sui Welling doesn't hesitate, urgently declaring their forfeit. Seeing this, Yan Tianxin stops her resistance and steps aside to make way. Sui Welling rushes to support Liang Xiaoyu, feeding him medicinal pills while personally circulating her cultivation to help stabilize the chaos within his body. The unruly energy of the immortal brew is difficult to tame, and the situation looks grim. Liang Xiaoyu's meridians are severely damaged, leaving his dantian in ruins. If Sui Welling hadn't arrived just in time, Liang Xiaoyu would have likely met his end right here. We see Lu Ran looking at the 2 wasted cups of brew on the table. Finally unable to bear the waste of such fine spirits, Lu Ran stands up and calls out, declaring that he should be the one to try such excellent wine. Qin Wuyao's expression changes instantly as she grabs him, her voice filled with genuine worry, asking Lu Ran if he has lost his mind. She reminds him of the terrifying aftereffects he just witnessed. Others might not know his secrets, but Qin Wuyao understands his true situation perfectly. As the master of the 9 provinces' fortune, he cannot afford to have an accident here. However, Lu Ran, feeling the buzz of the wine, simply waves her off. He mutters to himself that letting good wine go to waste is a sin, and while rewards are fine, the wine itself is the real priority. He calculates that the rewards for the immortal brew must be generous. Though he desires the Frost Moon's sword, there is something he wants even more. He is far more interested in the growth the brew provides than the sword itself. To be honest, standard sect resources are useless to someone with his unique constitution. With total confidence, he strides toward the table. Seeing this, a faint smile plays on Yan Tianxin's lips as she watches him approach. She offers a nod of approval, sensing that while Liang Xiaoyu was a pretender, Lu Ran is a true lover of the craft. She then offers a quiet warning. She reminds him that the brew's kick is incredibly powerful and urges him to act within his limits, a rare moment of concern from her. Normally, she wouldn't care if a contestant lived or died, but since he is someone Qin Wuyao values, she makes an exception. Lu Ran thanks her for the concern. He assures her he knows exactly what he is doing. Once he receives her nod of confirmation, the atmosphere shifts. We are reminded that ever since he was diagnosed with blocked meridians at age 10, the world had largely given up on his potential. He had been cast aside like a useless scrap of paper. Just then, Yan Tianxin prompts him to begin the 10-breath challenge if he is ready. He looks back to see she has already filled a fresh cup. The intoxicating aroma of the immortal brew makes his eyes light up with anticipation. He takes a deep breath, raises the cup, and drains it in one go. The moment the liquid hits his tongue, it explodes with raw power. Because of Lu Ran's unique constitution, the alcohol and spiritual energy are instantly absorbed by his dantian, sending an explosive force through his blood and bones. He instinctively braces for a wave of agony, but to his surprise, there is no pain, only a refreshing sensation spreading through his entire body. As the brew hits his system, his mind feels a brief, pleasant buzz. He wonders to himself how something this powerful could feel so comfortable. Suddenly, a crisp notification rings out in his mind. For drinking this rare brew, he is rewarded with 10 years of cultivation. His heart skips a beat. 10 years of progress for a single cup, a bargain by any standard. His dantian and sea of consciousness are now overflowing with energy. A breakthrough is now inevitable, a natural progression of his power. At this moment, every eye in the room is fixed solely on him. He has truly become the center of attention. We see the crowd watching intently, waiting for him to collapse in agony, just like the others did. Even Yan Tianxin and Qin Wuyao are secretly preparing to intervene, ready to act the very second something goes wrong with him. They have already calculated how to minimize the damage from the brew's violent aftereffects. However, as the seconds tick by, nothing happens. He remains perfectly fine, standing tall with a look of pure satisfaction on his face. To be honest, one cup has done wonders for him. His cultivation has surged by a full decade. It's a feeling anyone would find hard to resist. He begins to wonder what a whole jar would do. A century of cultivation would be within reach, potentially allowing him to ascend on the spot. This display leaves the entire audience in shock. Yan Tianxin cannot hide her astonishment. Even she has to brace herself against the layers of impact when drinking the immortal brew. She enjoys the raw intensity of the wine, and seeing Lu Ran handle it so easily makes her feel as though she has finally found a kindred spirit. A rare spark of excitement flickers in her eyes. She reflects on how many years it has been since she met someone who truly understands her craft. Before the aftertaste even fades, Lu Ran is already staring at Yin Tianxin, unable to help himself as he familiarly asks for another cup. With 10 years of power preserving, who could blame him for wanting more? But just as he feels like the luckiest man alive, the mood shifts. Liang Xiaoyu, having barely regained his composure, watches this scene with reddened eyes. Despite his heavy injuries, he cannot hide his bitterness. He grinds his teeth, claiming Lu Ran is merely putting on a front. Yin Tianxin gives him a dismissive glance before turning back to Lu Ran. Her voice is gentle as she explains that the brew is too potent. At his current level, he must digest it slowly rather than giving in to greed. Lu Ran can only lick his lips with a touch of regret, whispering to himself that when drinking with a true friend, 1,000 cups are not enough. With a single poetic line, he manages to pull Yin Tianxin into his inner circle while simultaneously delivering a sharp verbal blow to Liang Xiaoyu. The atmosphere is heating up, and though 10 breaths have passed, he remains perfectly fine, even entertaining the thought of another glass. Seeing this, Qin Wuyao immediately rushes forward to pull him back to his seat, carefully checking his aura and condition for any signs of collapse. Far from knocking him down, the immortal brew has nourished his flesh and bones with spiritual energy, permeating his entire being. His physical constitution has improved so visibly that it's hard to ignore. Seeing this, Qin Wuyao finally relaxes, a small smile playing on her lips. She thinks to herself that his tolerance is truly impressive, just as a wave of astonished whispers begins to spread through the entire hall. No one expected him to succeed so easily, looking as though he had merely enjoyed a casual afternoon tea rather than a lethal brew. The crowd recalls his previous dispute with the great Luo sword sect, and suddenly, that prestigious sect is starting to look a bit like a joke. Su Yueling and Liang Xiaoyu are still stuck on the stage, and as the sect leader, Su Yueling is feeling the weight of the moment. Deep down, she is filled with regret, wishing she had taken Liang Xiaoyu away to heal in private rather than enduring this public humiliation. Yin Tianxin steps beside Lu Ran with a beaming smile, handing over the Frost Rain sword and declaring that since he passed the challenge, the blade is his. She offers to help him dispel the alcohol, noticing his head is starting to spin, but Lu Ran is in no mood to cooperate and quickly stops her. He argues that the soul of drinking lies in the intoxication itself. If the alcohol is dispelled, the peerless wine would be wasted. He knows there are rewards for a hangover, and he isn't about to let anyone ruin his gaming experience. Yin Tianxin's eyes light up at his words. She finds him more likable by the second and drops the idea of sobering him up. Lu Ran dizzily reaches out and grasps the Frost Rain sword. The moment he touches it, a bone-chilling cold surges through him, making him shiver, a perfect contrast to the heat of the wine in his veins. Feeling quite pleased with himself, he suddenly draws the sword and points it toward the sky, overcome by a surge of heroic spirit. He shouts about the greatness of the wine and the blade, but the sword's natural chill is so intense that it begins to radiate outward. The sudden burst of cold makes those nearby shiver. Qin Wuyao reacts instantly, reaching out to press her hand firmly on his arm. Qin Wuyao whispers softly that Lu Ran is drunk, her demonic power surging quietly to suppress the twin frost sword intent he had just unleashed. However, everyone at this table is a master, though his sudden burst of sword intent was suppressed by Qin Wuyao in an instant. Their keen perceptions are impossible to block, and the power of that strike is now clearly etched into every person's mind. We see a look of sudden realization dawn on the crowd, as they finally recognize him as the peerless sword cultivator from 3 days ago. He is the one who shocked the entire field with a single strike, and since most guests here are sword users, their minds begin to race. Since he was conveniently kicked out of the great Luo sword sect, he has become a legendary free agent, a superstar without a home. The eyes of the various sect leaders begin to sparkle as they stare at him, looking very much like they've discovered a new continent. Suddenly, a thin-faced man in green robes on the left reacts first, seizing the opportunity to ask if Lu Ran has joined any other sect. Still dizzy from the wine, Lu Ran simply nods his head in a daze, not expecting the man to immediately introduce himself with lightning speed. The man, Chao Yuan, asks if the young friend would like to join the Taiyin Palace, promising to take him as a personal disciple right then and there. Hearing him jump the gun, the others finally snap out of it, and one sword cultivator immediately voices his disapproval. He teases Chao Yuan for moving too fast, noting that since Lu Ran is drunk, any promise he makes now shouldn't really count. The crowd below watches with reddened eyes, knowing that Chao Yuan of the Taiyin Palace is famous for his peerless Taiyin sword style. Countless disciples would give anything to enter the Taiyin Palace, yet here is the master himself, actively begging Lu Ran to join. In the Jiuli Empire, where sword cultivation reigns supreme, the 4 great sword sects guard the major passes under the 10 Yama lords. The Taiyin Palace is one of those 4, holding a status even higher than Yin Tianxin's Heavenly Alliance, which explains a great deal. Qiao Yuan sits at the same table as Yin Tianxin, not just as an old friend, but as a colleague serving the Jili Emperor together. Compared to the Taiyin Palace, the Great Luo Sword Sect is nothing more than a tiny shrimp at the foot of a giant mountain. Meanwhile, Liang Xiaoyu lies nearby as Su Yueling treats his wounds, his mind spiraling into a complete and utter mess. He had used his rare wood spirit constitution and endless schemes to climb the ranks of Great Luo, but now, his grand plans are falling apart. We see the irony of the situation. Lu Ran was cast out by Liang Xiaoyu, yet now Qiao Yuan is inviting him to become a direct disciple of the Taiyin Palace. If he accepts, his status will instantly eclipse the Great Luo Sword Sect, leaving Su Yueling behind and making the former prince look like a complete clown. Even if Liang Xiaoyu eventually takes over his sect, he would still be beneath Lu Ran, so, ignoring his injuries, he desperately shouts out. He cries out that Senior Qiao must be mistaken, claiming that while Lu Ran has the primal sword body, he was born with severed meridians and cannot absorb spiritual power. He argues that Lu Ran would be useless to any sect, a claim born purely from a fit of extreme jealousy. He simply cannot stand to see Lu Ran succeed. Deep down, Lu Ran can't help but think that Liang Xiaoyu is truly petty for trying to sabotage him like this, but then something unexpected happens. Qiao Yuan and the other masters are momentarily stunned by the boy's words. After a brief pause, Qiao Yuan and another sword cultivator both reach out. They each grab one of Lu Ran's wrists to check his pulse, and after a moment of investigation, Qiao Yuan's eyes suddenly light up with excitement. It turns out the primal sword body is very real, and that terrifying sword in tin alone would be enough to shake the world, but there is more. They can clearly feel the spiritual power of a peak late-stage golden core within his dantian, proving that the severed meridians theory was utter nonsense. Finding him to be in peak condition instead, Qiao Yuan completely ignores Liang Xiaoyu and shouts to Lu Ran with newfound passion. He declares that if Lu Ran joins the Taiyin Palace, he will be named as the successor to the sect leader immediately, a promotion that leaves Liang Xiaoyu speechless. The young schemer is stunned. He had intended to use the severed meridian's lie to push the masters away, but instead, he accidentally handed Lu Ran the throne. Having jumped from disciple to successor in a heartbeat, the other masters can no longer contain themselves and begin a frantic, colorful scramble for his favor. One shouts that Lu Ran is too straightforward and fond of strong liquor to practice the soft, Taiyin sword style of Qiao Yuan's palace. He insists that joining the Jingshu Palace is the only right path, though another master quickly cuts in to point out a potential flaw. He argues that while the pure yang sword style is powerful, its fire attribute might not actually be the best fit for Lu Ran's unique constitution. As the debate heats up, a master from the Liaodong Tiangang sect claims their bold, sweeping sword style is the perfect match for the young man. Not to be outdone, a representative from the Xinshao sect asks if their own style is somehow unworthy, and soon everyone is chattering around Lu Ran at once. Below the stage, Liang Xiaoyu's face turns ashen with rage and embarrassment, wishing he could disappear, completely forgetting that Su Yueling is still watching him. As the masters try to help him, the sheer intensity of his suppressed rage causes a sharp pain in his chest, and he suddenly coughs up a mouthful of blood before shouting to the crowd. He desperately asks if the seniors misunderstood him, insisting that Lu Ran was born with severed meridians and cannot cultivate at all, a claim that makes Qiao Yuan's eyes widen with fury. The master roars at him to shut up, and we can't help but find it amusing that someone is trying so hard to sabotage Lu Ran while he remains perfectly composed as the questioning continues. Qiao Yuan demands to know how Lu Ran could be unable to cultivate when he has reached the late-stage golden core, asking if the boy truly believes the masters are so blind as to miss such a realm. This revelation leaves Liang Xiaoyu completely stunned. We see his eyes bulge in disbelief at the mention of the late-stage golden core, a level he never imagined Lu Ran could reach. It is quite a shock, isn't it? Liang Xiaoyu considered himself a genius with his greenwood spirit body, becoming Su Yueling's favorite and enduring 10 years of bitter cultivation with endless resources. With the backing of the Great Luo Sword Sect and his royal lineage, he only just managed to touch the early-stage golden core, yet here Lu Ran is, already at the late stage. Only 4 days ago, Lu Ran was driven off the mountain while still in the early training phases, and now his progress has reached an almost absurd level of power. Su Yueling also feels a sudden tightening in her chest. She had vaguely sensed his late-stage golden core aura before, but she had dismissed it as a mere hallucination because it seemed too ridiculous. Now, she is forced to admit the truth. In just 4 days since leaving the suppression and contempt of the Great Luo Sword Sect, Lu Ran's cultivation has soared beyond all reason. And the surprises don't end there, as his status has transformed just as rapidly as his internal power. We see the Saintess of the Jade Lake, the little princess of the Great Qin Pavilion, and the successor of the Tianji Pavilion, Qin Wuyao, all proactively seeking his favor. In these few days, he has truly begun to shine with an overwhelming light, a stark contrast to the 10 years he spent suffering under the verdict that his meridians were severed. He endured cold stares at the eastern gate and saw his home on Jade Peak given to Liang Xiaoyu with a single word from her. Deep down, he knows she threw away a loyal disciple. Sui Welling feels a wave of distress as her eyes redden, 1,000 words trapped in her chest that she cannot speak, knowing how inappropriate it would be to voice them now. From our perspective, Lu Ran is now the sole focus of the entire arena, while Sui Welling has become irrelevant and Liang Xiaoyu is nothing more than a marginalized figure. She had long ago seen through Liang Xiaoyu's fake persona, but she never expected him to be so incredibly calculating and petty. To be honest, his hypocrisy is quite staggering. He speaks without thinking, proving himself to be a typical opportunist. Meanwhile, Lu Ran steals a glance at Wang Yujiao and the other disciples below the stage. He notices they look utterly unremarkable and uniform, with nothing special about them at all, while Sui Welling feels like a deflated balloon, her heart filled with a strange, swelling bitterness. She can't help but wonder silently. If she hadn't given up on him when he was 10 years old just because of those severed meridians, how different would their lives be today? She wonders if everything would be different if she had focused on teaching him instead of casting him aside. Meanwhile, Lu Ran remains in a daze as the masters continue their bidding war. The sight of these powerful figures fighting over him makes him feel lightheaded, and memories of his life at the great Luo sword sect before age 10 begin to resurface as if history is repeating itself. However, he understands all too well that even with everyone praising him today, if he were to suffer an accident or lose his system, he could be abandoned again at any moment. Reality has a way of being quite harsh, doesn't it? Because of this, he has no intention of accepting any sex offer just yet, choosing instead to let the alcohol take over while he waits for his rewards. He is simply looking forward to a good night's sleep. At that very moment, Sui Welling and Liang Xiaoyu stand up, preparing to make their exit from the arena. After stabilizing Liang Xiaoyu's injuries and the internal shock from the alcohol, Sui Welling composes herself and suggests they leave first, hoping for a quiet end to the day. We might have expected a peaceful conclusion, but the alcohol has clearly clouded Liang Xiaoyu's judgment. Suddenly, he grits his teeth and lunges toward Lu Ran from only 3 steps away. In the blink of an eye, his long sword is unsheathed and aimed directly at the back of Lu Ran's head, causing Sui Welling's face to pale as she screams for him to stop. We see her desperate attempt to intervene, but it is already too late. Deep down, she is likely exploding with frustration at how Liang Xiaoyu's supposedly calm and kind persona has utterly vanished. To be honest, his decision-making in this critical moment is beyond poor. With the 4 great sects currently fighting to recruit Lu Ran, he actually dares to attempt a public assassination. Perhaps he fancies himself the protagonist of some story where he is invincible, but in reality, his jealousy has turned into something truly pathological and reckless. While Lu Ran is still too dazed to react, Qiao Yuan suddenly moves, raising a hand to catch Liang Xiaoyu's blade between 2 fingers with effortless precision. No matter how hard Liang Xiaoyu struggles, he cannot move the sword even an inch forward. Qiao Yuan's face is a mask of murderous intent as he coldly asks how he dares touch someone the Tyene Palace has claimed. It is a bold move, certainly, but a foolish one. With a sharp wave of his hand, Qiao Yuan releases a burst of energy that shatters the surrounding air with the force of a steel explosion. At the critical second, Sui Welling rushes forward to pull Liang Xiaoyu behind her, manifesting her full spiritual defense to shield him from the impact. However, the gap in their cultivation is simply too vast. With a deafening bang, Sui Welling is sent flying backward by the shockwave while Liang Xiaoyu begins to regain a sliver of sobriety. He stands there frozen, his face turning a sickly shade of green as the disciples from various sects watch in stunned silence, amazed by his sheer lack of common sense. It seems Liang Xiaoyu's intellect isn't quite as sharp as his sword. Despite her injuries, Sui Welling hurries back to his side and bows to the masters, struggling to maintain her composure. She begs for their forgiveness, blaming herself for failing to teach her disciple properly, but the masters remain grim-faced as their anger continues to simmer. In their minds, a simple apology for poor teaching isn't enough to settle the matter, especially when a genius like Lu Ran was nearly struck down by someone so consumed by petty jealousy. Huang Ian is ready to end him right here, asking if a few hollow words are truly enough to pay for such a crime. Sui Welling knows an apology won't suffice, so she turns to Lu Ran with gritted teeth. She understands that only Lu Ran can decide Liang Xiaoyu's fate now. In a low, desperate voice, she pleads with him, claiming Xiaoyu was merely ignorant and impulsive. She offers an apology on his behalf, asking Lu Ran to show mercy for the sake of their past bond. After all, Xiaoyu is her direct disciple, flawed in character, perhaps, but still her responsibility. She promises to discipline him strictly if he is spared. We can hear the sheer helplessness in her voice. To be honest, the great Luo sword sect hasn't had a promising talent in years. With Lu Ran previously dismissed as having no future, Liang Xiaoyu was their only hope. If he dies today, the sect's entire legacy might very well vanish with him. The powerful masters shift their gaze toward Lu Ran, waiting for his final judgment. Yin Tianxin remains silent, but Qin Wuyao narrows her eyes, watching Su Yueling and Liang Xiaoyu closely. We know that Qin Wuyao has already investigated Lu Ran's 10 years of hardship at the Great Luo Sword Sect. It is a history of suffering that he has kept buried deep within his heart. There were countless times he wished Su Yueling would look his way, but her mind was always occupied by Liang Xiaoyu. She had even given away his precious little fish peak without a second thought. Still hazy from the alcohol, Lu Ran turns his gaze toward the pair. Suddenly, Su Yueling turns to Liang Xiaoyu and barks a single, sharp command. Kneel. Liang Xiaoyu freezes, his face a mask of humiliation and disbelief. The very idea of kneeling before Lu Ran is something he can barely comprehend, let alone accept. His heart screams in protest, as he has always enjoyed looking down on Lu Ran. But in this critical moment, Lu Ran's cold blade, the Han Jian, slowly slides from its sheath. As the sword points directly at him, Liang Xiaoyu's will utterly collapses. He sinks to his knees, though the shame and jealousy inside him are only growing more toxic by the second. Throughout today's banquet, Lu Ran has crushed him at every turn. While the divine wine nearly destroyed Xiaoyu's foundation, Lu Ran handled it with an almost supernatural tolerance. Not only is Lu Ran unharmed, but he is also the one receiving rewards and being courted by the four great sections. Now, Xiaoyu's very life hangs on a word from the man he once despised. In the blink of an eye, their social standings have completely flipped. Liang Xiaoyu is paralyzed by a mixture of fear and embarrassment, yet he has no choice but to beg for his life. Lu Ran looks down coldly at the kneeling figure before shifting his gaze to Su Yueling's weary face. For a brief moment, a flicker of softness passes through his eyes. Perhaps it is a lingering attachment to his childhood. After all, it was Su Yueling who brought him to the sect and looked after him with such care until he turned 10. It would be a lie to say he feels nothing at all, but 10 years of cold indifference have forced him to see reality for what it is. Deep down, he reflects on the past with a heavy heart. He tells himself that she was the one who gave him a home when he was small. He lowers his head, lost in thought, knowing full well that without her, he would have died long ago. His life was a gift from her, in a way, and so, he decides that this time, he will spare her disciple as a final way to settle that ancient debt. It is time to repay that kindness, he tells himself, but as he prepares to settle the debt, the cold energy of the Han Jian suddenly explodes. The aura fluctuates wildly as memories from his 100-year dream resurface with terrifying clarity, showing him a future where Liang Xiaoyu becomes a tyrant. In that vision, Xiaoyu seizes control of the Great Luo Sword Sect, leading to a path of ruin where the sect is left in utter desolation. Most tragic of all, Su Yueling is eventually stripped of her cultivation and tortured to death by Xiaoyu's own hand, a fate so cruel it seems almost absurd. Lu Ran realizes that by killing Liang Xiaoyu now, he could save Su Yueling from that catastrophe, effectively paying back her gift of life with a life taken. And yet, Su Yueling watches him with complete confusion, unable to understand why he speaks of gratitude while preparing a killing blow against her disciple. The logic escapes her entirely, and without a second thought, she rushes forward to pull Liang Xiaoyu back, shielding him with her own body. Her eyes are filled with desperation as she begs Lu Ran for mercy, acknowledging that while she may no longer be his master, she asks this one final favor. Lu Ran opens his mouth to explain, but how can he possibly describe the visions of a future dream? He can only offer a bitter smile and tell them to leave. With a heavy sigh, he turns his back on them, feeling the weight of the situation as the alcohol finally begins to cloud his senses entirely. The world starts to spin before his eyes, while a relieved Su Yueling quickly helps the resentful Liang Xiaoyu to his feet to make their escape. She offers several hurried thanks before leading him away. Meanwhile, the other disciples of the Great Luo Sword Sect follow, too ashamed to remain any longer. Back at the Heavenly Alliance, powerful figures like Chao Yuan are still trying to win Lu Ran over, but the young man is reaching his limit. A moment later, the alcohol takes full control, and he collapses onto the table in a total stupor. Meanwhile, we see the sect members traveling down the mountain. The atmosphere among the Great Luo Sword Sect group is suffocatingly tense as they ride in silence, though Liang Xiaoyu is secretly seething with humiliation. His chest heaves with fury and his teeth are clenched tight as he begins to plot how he might seize control of the sect as quickly as possible. He glances back at the hesitant Su Yueling and the fickle Wang Yujiao, viewing his fellow elite disciples with nothing but cold contempt. In his eyes, they are all useless cowards who failed to speak up for him when it mattered most, leaving him to face his shame alone. He even feels a growing resentment towards Su Yueling. He tells himself that if she had simply crippled Lu Ran earlier, none of this would have happened. He also blames the incompetent Wang Yujiao, who had the chance to kill Lu Ran when he first left the mountain but failed to finish the job. He believes failing to kill Lu Ran gave him the chance to rise. Though Liang Xiaoyu cannot fathom how his cultivation speed became so absurd, he instinctively senses a secret. He is convinced Lu Ran obtained some heaven-defying method, a thought that drives him nearly mad with envy. Wang Yujiao steps forward, whispering for her master not to worry. She claims Lu Ran won't be jumping around for long, and once Xiaoyu becomes sect leader, even the Heavenly Alliance must bow. Su Yueling's expression remains deeply conflicted. We can see the turmoil in her heart. The small disciple she personally cast away has now risen so high that he even holds the power of life and death over Xiaoyu. Su Yueling turns to Wang Yujiao, her voice eerily calm as she asks if there is truly some deep-seated hatred between her and Lu Ran. Wang Yujiao is stunned by the question. Su Yueling presses on, remembering how Yujiao used to look after him before the age of 10, even caring for him during her own seclusion. The little fellow used to love following her around, and back then, she was quite the caregiver. Su Yueling wonders aloud how things could have changed so drastically. Wang Yujiao's eyes flicker with avoidance, but seeing Liang Xiaoyu beside her, she grinds her teeth and insists that Lu Ran was born with severed meridians. She argues he wasted the sect's resources for years, resources that should have belonged to Xiaoyu. To her, there is no one else to blame but Lu Ran. Hearing this, Su Yueling can only let out a long, weary sigh. She blames herself for bringing the young boy back to the Sword Sect in the first place. He was abandoned by fate because of his condition, yet he was the one forced to accept the consequences. Deep down, she feels the real person to blame is herself. Her heart is full of self-reproach, the same thoughts repeating in her mind like a haunting refrain. Suddenly, Liang Xiaoyu speaks up with a tone of absolute determination. With a look of cold resolve, he tells his master that Lu Ran is now an enemy of the great Luo Sword Sect, and she shouldn't dwell on the past. He promises that once he grows stronger, he will reclaim the dignity the sect lost today. It is clear to everyone that he has long since viewed Lu Ran as a foe. Su Yueling's eyes sharpen as she takes a deep breath and slowly exhales. She finally speaks, telling Xiaoyu that she understands his vast ambition. She knows he isn't content being a mere disciple and that the sect leader's position will eventually be his. Her only hope is that he doesn't fail her expectations. She tells him the revival of the entire sect rests on his shoulders, though in truth, she is well aware of the darkness growing within him. The situation is even worse than she anticipated. She fears that the day he takes control, the disciples of the great Luo Sword Sect may face a grim fate. Liang Xiaoyu nods immediately, putting on a show of sincerity as he assures his master that he will lead the sect to a new era of prosperity. We can see his words are hollow, more of a performance than a promise. Meanwhile, Wang Yujiao listens to Su Yueling's words, her mind already racing with new schemes. Vague images of their childhood training together still flicker in her mind, but Liang Xiaoyu's arrogant confidence quickly causes any lingering sympathy to vanish. Wang Yujiao rides her horse closer to Xiaoyu, smiling brightly as she declares that his strength is unmatched and surpassing Lu Ran is no mere dream. She promises to always support him, since Su Yueling has decided to entrust the sect to Xiaoyu. Yujiao is now doing everything she can to secure her own future. She is desperately flattering Xiaoyu, yet we recall from the 100-year dream that her ultimate fate was nothing short of a tragic disaster. Time passes quickly, and as evening descends, Lu Ran finally wakes up from his deep slumber. He slowly climbs out of bed and looks around. He surveys his surroundings with a groggy gaze. He realizes he is currently inside a quiet room. It is a simple, peaceful place. He had expected a massive breakthrough after his drunken stupor, assuming the rewards were based on his physical state, but things aren't quite so simple. Despite being right on the verge of a breakthrough, the system didn't grant him the expected advancement reward. To be honest, it's a bit of a letdown. He rubs his chin and mutters to himself, realizing that system rewards vary in quality and that this random post-hangover draw gave him something else. While grumbling, he opens the system panel to examine the prize. Even if it's just a sword technique, surely a system-generated skill won't be too disappointing. The technique is called God Slayer, a move that can supposedly slay a god in one strike, ignoring all defensive treasures and protective gear. It can instantly kill a cultivator in the spirit-severing realm, but it is useless against those above or below that specific level. Yes, it's that specific. Lu Ran is stunned by the description. He is currently only in the Golden Core realm, an entire major stage away from the legendary spirit-severing experts. Yet this technique allows for an instant kill against those masters while bypassing all defenses, a genuine, high-level god-slaying skill. It is a true rule-based execution. Suddenly, his eyes light up, no longer feeling that this reward is useless or niche. It is far from being a chicken rib, something of little value. While he still can't beat those in higher realms, he can now absolutely dominate spirit-severing cultivators. Just then, the door is pushed open. Qin Wuyao walks slowly into the room. Lu Ran is sitting on the edge of the bed in a daze when he hears footsteps and looks up. It is Qin Wuyao who has entered. Her gaze is soft as she casually asks if he is finally awake. Lu Ran nods, absent-mindedly pulling up the blanket. He looks at her and asks what her current realm is, what level boss Yen has reached, and how the strength of Chao Yuan and the others compares. His heart is racing with curiosity as he throws out this string of questions. Qin Wuyao is slightly taken aback by his sudden interest in cultivation ranks. It seems a bit odd to start an interrogation the moment one wakes up, but she doesn't dwell on it for long. To be honest, he's always been a bit unpredictable. She answers calmly, explaining that she is in the early stage of the spirit-severing realm, while Yin Yi is already at the late stage. As for Chao Yuan and the rest, she isn't entirely sure of their exact progress, but she estimates they are all within that same spirit-severing level. Lu Ran is secretly stunned by this revelation. Meanwhile, we return to the main hall, where the atmosphere has become rather subtle. Yin Tianqing toys with his teacup, his expression shifting slightly. He rolls his eyes and teases Chao Yuan and the others, noting that in previous years, they would flee faster than rabbits the moment the feast ended. He asks why they are all lingering here now. Chao Yuan grins like an old fox, claiming that as old friends, he simply hasn't explored the Heavenly Alliance enough yet. He insists he's just bored and wants to hang around for a few more days. But when he suggests the others should probably leave, the room instantly erupts. The others snap back, asking why they should be the ones to go if he's staying. They claim the Heavenly Alliance is lovely, and they also want to look around. One even insists he hasn't had enough of the local wine yet. The bickering makes the grand hall sound more like a noisy marketplace, which is quite the sight. We can see right through their little schemes, and so can Yin Tianqing. He decides to drop the act and tells them to stop pretending. He points out that they've surely all received the investigation results by now. The group's expressions turn awkward as their masks of casual friendship slip away. These major powers work with terrifying efficiency. They have already uncovered everything about Lu Ran's journey, from his time at the Great Luo Sword Sect until now. They know all about his heavenly blocked meridians and his quiet departure. Yin Tianqing puts away his smile, his gaze turning sharp as he asks for their honest thoughts. The scene turns serious in an instant. The joking is over. They admit that while the Great Luo Sword Sect situation is a pity, it is also somewhat understandable. From a Sect's perspective, there was no reason to pour core resources into someone with blocked meridians. However, they agree that the Sect's treatment of him was cruel. Lu Ran's 10 years at the Great Luo Sword Sect were spent as a laughingstock. What they investigated was likely only the tip of the iceberg regarding his suffering. In reality, the mockery Lu Ran endured would have broken a normal person long ago. Most would have simply given up and left before ever reaching this point. Just days ago, Lu Ran was merely at the peak of the chi refining stage, which perfectly matched the profile of someone with blocked meridians who couldn't absorb spiritual energy. Yet now he has already reached the peak of the golden core stage. We can all understand what that implies. The group begins discussing this fervently, and it feels a bit like watching a crowd gossip over tea and seeds. In just a few short days, despite his blocked meridians, he jumped from chi refining to the peak of golden core. This is a speed that even the legendary 9 emperors of Kyushu would find themselves humbled by. His growth rate isn't just heaven-defying, it's bordering on the absurd. Even more ridiculous is the fact that he possesses such a powerful sword intent. Everyone present is well aware of what this means. Although the incident at the Nine Kings banquet was forcibly suppressed by Qin Wuyao, the truth remains clear to those in power. Once he truly comes into his own, sweeping across the 9 provinces will be only a matter of time. However, Yin Tianqing suddenly pours a bucket of cold water over their excitement. He admits that while they are all correct about the boy's potential, Lu Ran's past experiences mean he is unlikely to ever agree to join any sect or faction again. He suggests they all give up on that idea. Naturally, their expressions instantly deflate, and the atmosphere in the room cools significantly. The investigation results are plain as day. Winning him over to their side is almost an impossibility. In the short term, at least, he won't trust anyone. Yin Tianqing reminds them that this is exactly why the Heavenly Mystery Pavilion acted so swiftly, sending Qin Wuyao to find him the moment he left the mountain. They've had their eyes on him from the start. We shouldn't forget what kind of person Yujizi of the Heavenly Mystery Pavilion is. The fact that she proactively approached him when he was still just a low-level cultivator speaks volumes. Chao Yuan suddenly has a moment of realization. He concludes that Yujizi must have calculated some critical variable regarding the future. Yin Tianqing nods, his gaze turning serious as he agrees. But even knowing his potential, Qin Wuyao never tried to force Lu Ran to join them. She simply befriended him. It was a brilliant move and one we should learn from. If they cannot recruit him, they must at least ensure he doesn't become their enemy. As Yin Tianqing finishes, we see the others exchange knowing glances, immediately grasping his meaning. There's no need to force a recruitment. They just need to maintain a solid, friendly relationship with him. When the day comes that he truly shines, these old friends will naturally benefit from his success. It's a classic case of wanting to bask in his glow. Then Yin Tianqing's expression turns heavy. He notes one more thing. The Underworld Emperor has been locked in a fierce struggle with their 9-leaf faction lately, and the Emperor's power is growing more aggressive. If Qin Wuyao hadn't been supporting them from the shadows, the Underworld Emperor might have already invaded to cause chaos. At this critical juncture, They absolutely cannot let Lu Ran's talent be leaked. If the Underworld Emperor finds out, he will surely send assassins, and the boy might be eliminated before he even begins. His tone was heavy, and we can feel the weight of his words as the others grow solemn. The air in the room suddenly feels as thick and cold as a layer of frost. Yin Tianxing continued, warning them not to linger here lest the Underworld Emperor's spies notice something. He urged them to return to their sects immediately. As for Lu Ran, he promised to make every arrangement to ensure the boy's safety. After he finished speaking, a heavy silence settled over the group. Deep down, Lu Ran couldn't help but complain to himself. After all that talk, it seemed Yin Tianxing was just as intent on keeping a close eye on him as the rest. However, in a situation like this, no one could find a reason to argue. The threat of the Underworld Emperor's scouts was simply too great. The danger was real, and everyone knew it. If he stayed in the Ninely faction now, it would only give the Emperor a target. Even more absurdly, if they took him back to their own sects together, he would become a massive beacon for trouble, practically inviting the Underworld Emperor to strike. Xiao Yuan thought for a moment before finally speaking up. He agreed that they should withdraw to their respective sects and prepare. The task of nurturing Lu Ran's growth would be left entirely to Yin Tianxing. Xiao Yuan promised full support and any resources needed, his voice firm. The other powerful leaders quickly chimed in, voicing their agreement. In truth, every one of them wanted to train Lu Ran personally, but facing his heaven-defying growth rate, they all felt a strange sense of powerlessness. Even a force as grand as the Ninely faction felt too small to contain a talent like his. It was like trying to keep a dragon in a garden pond. By evening, we find Lu Ran sitting at the dinner table, staring at the messy assortment of dishes in his bowl. He was clearly lost in thought. The others had already left the Ninely territory to avoid trouble, not even daring to say goodbye for fear of being marked by the Underworld Emperor. Lu Ran almost laughed at the sight of himself eating alone. He looked up at Yin Tianxing, feeling a bit restless, and finally decided to speak. He quietly asked if there was any more of that immortal brew left. Inside, he was incredibly excited. After all, one cup was worth 10 years of cultivation. To him, that wine was a literal treasure trove of experience, better than any rare herb. It's no exaggeration to say even a sip was worth a year of hard work. However, Yin Tianxing simply shook his head, a flash of cunning in his eyes. He told the boy that while there was some left, he couldn't have it yet. The spiritual power from the previous drink hadn't fully settled, and drinking more now would only damage his foundation. He needed to stay and recover first. He assured Lu Ran that as long as he stayed with the Heavenly Alliance, the wine wasn't going anywhere. Lu Ran could already imagine himself drinking his fill later. Yin Tianxing had clearly found Lu Ran's weakness to convince him to stay, a truly brilliant move. Lu Ran muttered to himself that since he had nowhere else to go, he might as well stick around. Qin Wuyao, watching from the side, nearly burst out laughing at his expression, teasingly calling him a hopeless drunk who only cared for wine. While keeping an eye on the boy, Yin Tianxing turned to Qin Wuyao and asked what she planned to do. Even though, to be honest, he already knew the answer, he still asked as a matter of formality. It was painfully obvious that Qin Wuyao couldn't bear the thought of leaving Lu Ran's side, which was hardly a surprise. And so, the conversation shifted. But speaking of what comes next, once a cultivator finally reaches the nascent soul stage,